Hey guys, before we get to the episode, I want to tell you guys about a great new app that I want to try out. It's called Wisdom. So I downloaded the app on my phone, and I'm really excited to go live and take questions from you guys and dive deep with you and hopefully connect with you on a deeper level and really help you grow and expand whatever it is you want to do, whether it be personal development or podcasting or whatever the case may be. So join me over on the free app called Wisdom. My username's at Justin T. Shank. You can find me there, and I'm actually going live this Thursday, December 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be going live, taking your questions, diving deep, hopefully doing a little bit of teaching and connecting with you guys at a deeper level. Again, download the app Wisdom and follow my username at Justin T. Shank, and you'll get notified when I go live on Thursday, and I cannot wait to see you guys there. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. I'm your host, Justin Shank. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, and podcaster who years ago decided to go on a journey on how to grow in all areas of my life. What I found out was it's really a matter of focusing on the 4 pillars of life: business, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. And that's what we do here. We explore how to continuously grow in those areas, all while having a ton of fun doing it. I'm really excited you're on this journey with me. Now let's get to this week's episode. This week, I sit down with Dr. Bill Schindler. Dr. Bill is an internationally known archaeologist, primitive technologist, and chef. He founded and directs the Eastern Shore Food Lab with a mission to preserve and revive ancestral dietary approaches to create a nourishing, ethical, and sustainable food system. His work is currently the focus of Wired Magazine's YouTube series, Basic Instincts and Food Science, and he co-starred in the National Geographic Channel series, The Great Human Race. In this episode, we dive into his new book, Eat Like a Human. You see, our relationship with food is filled with confusion and insecurity. Vegan or carnivore, vegetarian or gluten-free, keto or Mediterranean, fasting or paleo. Every day we hear about a new ingredient that is good or bad for us, a new diet that promises everything. But the secret to becoming healthier, losing weight, living an energetic life, and healing the planet has nothing to do with counting calories or feeling deprived. The key is relearning how to eat like a human. We dive into all of that. We dive into Dr. Bill Schindler's incredible story and journey of how he really discovered this, of how being an overweight kid drove him into a form of eating disorder when he wrestled in high school and college, and how he really got healthy a couple years into his marriage when he realized he needed to show up for his family and bring his passion into the home and into the kitchen. And just a friendly reminder that Growth Now Summit live tickets are still on sale. You can head over to growthnowsummit.com and grab your tickets today. We just announced Susie Miller, who is one of my favorite human beings as a keynote speaker. I think she's going to absolutely blow you guys away with her information and knowledge. And of course, we still have Nick Santanastasso, Chris Van Vliet, myself, and so many more speaking at the event in order for you to grow in all areas of your life. growthnowsummit.com. Grab your tickets now. And now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with Dr. Bill Schindler. Bill, welcome to the show, man.
It is a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, I told you the story before I hit record, but I'll share the story with my audience. I walked into Barnes & Noble with my girlfriend, and we were looking at some of the new release books, and your book was on the shelf with some of the top books in the world, and yours is called Eat Like a Human. And my girlfriend goes, "Oh, I follow this guy on Instagram. You should get him on the podcast." And so I reached out, and here we are, man. And I'm really excited to dive into everything that you talk about in the book, and your story is so fascinating, and how you've been able to tie in new ventures of business with your family, with how you eat and all the crazy stuff, man. But why don't we take a second right now, and Bill, take a second and introduce yourself to my audience of who you are today, and then we'll break down how you got there.
Sure. That is always the hardest question anybody asks me, or if anybody asks me to do. I am an archaeologist and anthropologist by training. I have my PhD in archaeology and anthropology from Temple University. And it may seem strange that an archaeologist is here having just written a book about health and wellness, and we're sitting here talking to you about the same thing. But what I've found out is through a lifetime of trying to learn how to feed myself and my own family, that archaeology really holds a lot of the keys, the foundation to understanding human diet and health. So I started as a field archaeologist. I really got sort of enthralled in something called experimental archaeology. So a lot of my work is in primitive technology. I've been trained by some of the best people in the world on how to replicate stone tools and ancient forms of fire and brain tanning and ceramics and those sorts of things. And there's a branch of archaeology called experimental archaeology, where we take these primitive skills and conduct experiments on things we think were being done in the past, and try to understand how stone tools were used and made and those sorts of things, and really interpret prehistoric life. So that's the kind of that's the background that I'm coming from, trying to answer this question, how and what we should be eating. I was a professor at Monmouth University for several years, and more recently at Washington College for 15 years. And I literally just left Washington College in June, so that my wife and I could launch a business called the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, which is where everything that you and I are about to talk about for the next half an hour or so, where we actually bring that all to life and create incredibly nourishing food for the community.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And obviously, I've had a number of people in the wellness space, whether they be fitness coaches like BJ Gador or Sean T, or guys in the health space like Adam Shibley or Danny Vega, who we talked about before we record as well. And I think what's fascinating about a lot of those individuals is that their passion for health and wellness comes from their own personal journey, meaning they've overcome something, or the family member has gotten sick from something and they've started to kind of make shifts. What was your origin story, and what was your fascination with learning how to eat healthier?
So I've always been fascinated. Well, learning how to eat healthier has been a more recent and really more practical way of approaching it. It was always trying to lose weight, right? Which is what most of us are always trying to do, trying to lose weight. And I grew up as an incredibly, as a kid, overweight kid that had an incredibly poor body image and self-image. And I remember, I had this unhealthy relationship with food. And I viewed food as something that made me ugly or made me fat, or, made other kids pick on me or beat me up or whatever. And I know it may sound strange, and it sounds strange to me now, because to me, food is supposed to be something that's nourishing, that nourishes your body, nourishes your soul, nourishes all of you. And the majority of my life, especially as a kid, food was something that I just had this, oh my gosh, I know I have to eat, and I know I have these cravings that I'm trying to satisfy, but my gosh, every time I take a bite of food, I'm making myself uglier. And this went on for most of my childhood up until high school. And then in high school, I started to actually become an athlete, which was a huge step for me, because I was the most unathletic person prior to that. And I was working out 24/7 as hard as I could. My diet was still poor, but my body, at least from the outside, looked athletic. So if you looked at me in high school, you'd be like, oh man, that guy's an athlete. But still, I was still having, I was suffering still from this incredibly poor body image. And at the same time, the sport that I took to was wrestling. And especially then, but still now, wrestlers have an incredibly unhealthy relationship with food, or at least many of us do or did. And food was now not something that's made me ugly. Food is now something that prevented me from making weight. It was something I was now scared of putting food into my mouth. Wrestled through high school. I wrestled for Ohio State and the College of New Jersey. So I was wrestling at a very high level. And then as soon as I stopped wrestling and I finally graduated, it's another story for another time, but it took me 10 years to get my undergrad. But 10 years after I finished college.
Congratulations. I didn't finish college, so you got me.
Well, it took me 10. I never thought it was going to happen, actually. 10 years in college, I finally graduated. I was no longer an athlete, and all that weight, flooded back on. And I was doing my PhD at the time, and I was starting a family and suffering from incredible, nasty metabolic disease. And I had everything from restless leg syndrome to irritable bowel syndrome. The story I always tell, and not to harp on it for too long, but I know at least a piece of this might connect with somebody that's listening. My guts and body was in such bad shape that every time my wife and I went out to dinner, and it wasn't very often, we didn't have a lot of money, so it was a big event, which made what I'm going to say even worse. As soon as we left the house to drive to go to a restaurant, I would start identifying the places that had bathrooms that I could stop at on the way home, because I knew after I ate dinner, I would have to go to the bathroom, lose dinner at least once or twice on the way home. And which made my wife incredibly angry, because she's like, we just paid for all this food. But year after year after year. And I have been sitting my whole life trying to answer this question: what should I be eating? And I knew if somebody just said, eat this, that I could lose this weight and I could make myself look better and I feel better about myself. And obviously, as we all know, it's a lot more complicated than that. But I just thought if somebody said what I should eat, and I thought I was a lost cause. And I was going into my 30s, And my wife and I started to have a family, and we started to have kids. My oldest daughter is 18 now. And then I realized, you know what, now it's not about me, it's about my kids. I don't want my kids to have to deal with all the things that I dealt with. So I started to buckle down and really try to figure out how to feed my kids. I've been through all the different fad diets. None of them really seem to work. And one day, and again, not to harp on it for too long, because I know we have a lot to cover. My wife, I was out in the garage, and I was replicating stone tools, because actually, believe it or not, even though banging two rocks together to get a sharp edge seems like an incredibly simple task that our ancestors have been doing for almost 3.5 million years, the higher levels of it is incredibly complicated and takes years and years and years of practice. So it was at a time in my life where I was practicing at least once a day, replicating stone tools. I was in the garage, so I'd have a full day of work. I'm sitting in the garage banging stone tools. I had a family. My wife comes outside. She says, "Listen, can you come inside? Can you bring that inside?" And I said, "Bring it inside. This makes all kinds of a mess. I'm not going to bring it inside." She goes, "No, not the stones. She goes, this passion, this drive that you have to learn and do. Can you bring it inside and you have a family, like make it relevant to us?" And I'm like, wow, she's right. But how the hell do I make stone tools relevant to my family? I mean, it's not 3.5 million years ago. So I thought about it. And about 2 weeks later, I was in the shower, and it hit me finally. The two things that have driven me my whole life. One is this quest to try to get healthy and learn how to eat properly, and this drive to like replicate stone tools and understand the prehistory and archaeology. They seem like two separate tracks, but that moment in the shower, they came together, and I realized, and this is the basis for just about everything that I do now. Almost every single prehistoric technology has something to do with food. Getting food, processing food, storing food, sharing food, redistributing food, whatever. And that's what I've been studying my whole life, right? All these prehistoric technologies. And if 3.5 million years worth of our ancestors' brain power, literally the smartest of our species and our ancestors for millions of years, were all focused on creating technologies to do something to our food, then it's probably pretty important to pay attention to. And it is. And we can talk more about it in just a second. But the final sort of piece here is what I've realized is that humans have one of the most inefficient digestive tracts of any animal on the planet. And meanwhile, we live in these fairly large mammal bodies with these incredibly massive brains that are so nutrient needy that they're more nutrient needy than any organ of any animal on the planet. And here we are with these incredibly inefficient digestive tracts. And what we do as humans, and what we've done for millions of years, is use these technologies for good. You can use food processing for bad, you use it for good. And the good is to create foods that are as safe and nourishing as possible for our bodies, right? To overcome our physical limitations and feed these brains and feed these bodies. And that's what we've done. And every step that we've done that through prehistory, we've created a better diet that supported body growth, population growth, and most importantly, brain growth. And that is the diet, that is the approach to the diet that built us as humans. We appear on this planet 300,000 years ago. And that is the foundation of the diet. I'm convinced that can create the healthiest, most nourishing, ethical, and sustainable food system possible.
No, and it makes absolute sense, right? And you have this video on your website of you talking about how, something so simple that should have 3 ingredients in it has all these crazy ingredients, and the list is so long. And really what you're talking about is not only the instinct of how humans have been doing it for so long, but simplifying what it is we're putting into our body and only eating natural things. Am I wrong by saying that?
No, 100%. And knowing what it is, right? Knowing exactly what it is you're putting into your body, especially those things you're putting into your body day after day after day after day after day. And unfortunately, we've given up that power. We've given up that knowledge to other people, right? Other people are now telling us what we should be eating and creating, marketing and advertising strategies and schemes to trick us and to tell us what we should be eating. And meanwhile, we're getting sicker and sicker. And the hard part about food, right? If you ate something and the next day you felt like you were going to die, you wouldn't eat it again. You can connect like, okay, that I ate that 3 hours ago or whatever, and you can connect it. But in most cases, these things are small incremental changes over time, or small incremental, bad things are happening to us. And 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, when it all comes to a head, like, yep, I'm sick, or I have this, or I have this, and it's hard to connect, the past 15 years of poor eating. And the other problem is we've also, not to get off track, but we've also done so much of that we've normalized feeling like crap when we hit 30, or feeling really bad when we're 40, or like we can't get out of bed and our feet are swollen when we're 50 and our knees crack. Oh, it's just old age. No, humans are not supposed to live like that. Wild animals do not live like that. Wild animals live amazing lives and then keel over dead. Right? That's how I want to live. I want to live an amazing life and then keel over dead. I don't, I want to do it as old as I can, but I don't want to be dying for 20, 30, 40 years and trying to make excuses for this and then get on. No. And it is most of that. And for some people, not all, but for some people, all of that is a result of poor diet. And the best part is a lot of it can be reversed. I don't care what age you are.
Yeah. And it's so true too, right? Like we've become so used to feeling like shit. And so sometimes when we eat those things, we don't even realize that we're feeling bad. We think that's just how we are and who we are. Like, right. Like we're always tired. We're always lethargic. We always feel a little sick, whatever the case may be. And it's such an interesting thing. So when you were making this switch and obviously doing all this research, what was the ultimate switch for you? Because so, like you had mentioned, you tried so many different things, and I wouldn't say eat like a human's a diet. It's a way of living. No. But when you look at it, you tried so many different things and you fall back into your same old routines. What was different this time?
There was a lot that was different. And first, let me just say, eat like a human. And what I talk about and discuss in this book is not a diet in the way that we think about diet. It's a lifestyle. It's an approach. The nice thing is it's incredibly accessible. It's relevant. It's meaningful. And no matter what diet you have or what way that you look at your relationship with your food and the world around you, and many of them are incredibly important. Many of them are and all of them are very personal, whether you are a carnivore, whether you're a vegan, whether you're a vegetarian. And I'm not going to dive into that right now. What I'm going to say is the approaches that I'm talking about in this book can improve your diet no matter what it is that you're eating. And you can, I do have strong feelings about the role of animals in ancestral human diets and the role of animals in a healthy human diet today. But even if you are a vegan, and I understand why you would be, right? I do, and I applaud people for being vegan for the reasons that they're vegan. If you are vegan and want to stay a vegan and apply the principles in this book to things like plants, then you're going to be a healthier vegan, no doubt. So it's not a diet; it's more of an approach to whatever it is you're already doing. But the nice thing is it is accessible. It is relevant. It's about knowledge. It's not about you do this and eat this 300 grams of this and then, never eat this and then, live the rest of your life. And you don't know why you're doing those things. It's, hey, understand where your food comes from, understand how your food is made. And most importantly, take the approaches to food, approaches that we've been using for sometimes thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years in some cases, and use them to make the food that you're feeding yourself and your family as absolutely nourishing as possible. And to me, and to answer your question more directly, what happened for me is that it worked. Like it worked in our lifestyle. I was, there was a year, I talk about it a lot. There was a year that I was dead set on making sure that any food that went into my mouth or anybody in my family's mouth, I collected, harvested, butchered, like almost every plant this one year was a foraged wild plant that I foraged myself. Every piece of meat, and if it wasn't, it was something that we grew. Every piece of meat that or animal product that my family ate was my son and I either hunted it, we butchered it, or we at least knew the person that raised an animal. We butchered it ourselves. We made all the butter, we made all the cheese, we made everything, right?
Wow. And
it was an incredible learning year for me. And in fact, in many ways, helped form the foundation of a lot of the approaches in this book. And I'm convinced that my family has never been more biologically healthy than that year. I know everything I had complete control over everything went into the bodies. Yeah. And it was all amazing. The problem
now, how old were your kids at this point? What year was this?
Oh, they were young. They would have been, this was probably 14 years ago. So they would have maybe 13 years ago. So they were like 6, 4, and 2, right
Wow.
around there.
Yeah.
That age
Yeah.
where, they were there, they were in the house, and it's so some people are sitting there applauding me, like, oh my God, that's amazing. But I'm here to tell you that we weren't healthy. Like, the stress level in that house was out of control. It was not sustainable. Every meal was a chore. And I loved to cook. Every meal was a chore. And if all that we were doing, if we were being hunter-gatherers, that's one thing. But we were still, my wife and I both had careers. The kids were in school. They had dance, they had basketball, they had whatever. And to make all that work was literally unsustainable. And the thing that I learned that year was that being healthy and being nourished means that it's both your biological health, but meeting or exceeding your emotional and cultural health as well. And I wasn't doing that. So this approach that, what ended up working for our family was an approach that actually worked for our family. It's something that allowed us to navigate that and walk that line between providing the healthiest diet possible, or healthiest food, most nourishing food possible, and living in a modern house with a modern job, and driving a modern car and doing all those things. And that's what really made it important. A lot of it financially, it made sense. Emotionally, it made sense. And just as importantly, and this is something that's, I think, quite often lost in dietary approaches, it also met or exceeded our ideals or thoughts about what the most ethical and sustainable food system is as well. And those are all things that, certainly fall into play.
Yeah. So now that you are living this lifestyle now for, 15 plus years, what do you ever go out to eat? Are you always cooking every single meal? Like,
Absolutely.
What's that look like?
No, and that's part of it. We go out to eat. In fact, we go out to eat probably more than we should. But one of the things that I advocate the most is to take the food that you eat all the time. Your family eats literally all the time. And I don't care what it is. It could be mac and cheese. It could be, not that you should be eating mac and cheese, but realistically, figure out what it is your family is eating the most of, and learn to make that from scratch. Like, completely, 100. And I say from scratch, I mean all out, completely from scratch. And even if it's terrible, even if the dog won't eat it, you have now taken a step in your relationship and connection with your food that you can't get anywhere else. You can't read about it in a book. You can't listen to a podcast. You can't watch a documentary. You made it yourself. You understand everything there is to understand about that particular food. Most importantly, that food that you guys eat every day. And then if you go into the grocery store, you get it at a restaurant, you now are the most informed consumer possible. The marketing and the advertising don't work any longer. And you can buy the healthiest version possible of it. You can see through that, all those, and you're also supporting the food. And there are some amazing food manufacturers out there, food producers, and you can use your paycheck to help support them, and you can bring home the most nourishing version possible. Now, we do go out to eat. There's only usually about 2 or 3 things we'd ever order off almost anybody's menu, but we do, and we have to, because my son was playing travel soccer. We're on the road 2 or 3 days, and you know what? Yeah. I love to pack food for us. It's great. And those people that can pack food for all 3 of those days to leave, we used to do it, is great, but sometimes you can't. So if you understand what it is about that food, how it's made, where it comes from, what to order on a menu, then you can navigate it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so true, because like you talk about the propaganda and the media and all that stuff. And there was a thing, I think when Obama was the president, Michelle started like the Eat Healthy initiative, and it was for schools and all these things. And the main sponsor and the funding behind it was from Kellogg's. And I was like, that's not healthy. Like it. And then I hear what my girlfriend's kids eat at school, and I'm like, they claim it's healthy, and it's just not. Where's a good place for people to start this research to understand what I should be eating?
Yeah, again, I think the easiest thing, the first thing you should do is take something simple, but something you eat every day, and make it from scratch. And it could be bread. And I give the example in the book, like, listen, if all you do is start making bread, and literally that's it. You think about the amount, if your kids take a sandwich to school every day, the amount of time, they're in school from 5 years old to 18 years old, the majority of the year, every day of the week, and every day they eat 2 slices of bread, and all you did was change that bread. Think about that. And now, it's not sexy. It's not like this amazing Thanksgiving meal you made entirely from scratch, but it's worthwhile, and it builds over time. And by the time that they're 18 years old, you've made a significant impact in their diet and in their health. And they see you making bread, and there's that whole connection. So number one, I do truly, even if you're not the best cook in the world, it doesn't matter. Get in the kitchen and try to make something from scratch. Again, don't even do it and pretend you're going to have to eat it that night or that week or what have you. And no pressure. You screw it up, you throw it away, that's fine. But that's number one. Number two is take some links out of your food chain. My research spans millions of years, and if you look through that lens, what we think is normal today is incredibly weird. Like, it's never happened before. The first the first supermarket ever was in like 1908, or it was a Piggly Wiggly. I forget the year. That's almost everybody in the world right now. They go to some sort of a supermarket now at some big box store to get all of their food. And if you think about that difference, it used to be, and I mean, for millions of years, everything that you ate, you picked out of the ground or shot or killed or butchered yourself, or somebody in your family did, and you saw it at least. And that was an incredible close connection. But now we don't know the farmers. We don't know the pickers. We don't know the processors. We don't know the people that drove your food to the supermarket or unpacked that car, or most of us don't even know people put it on the shelf. We may know the person who checked us out and in the line because we're there every week and we might go to the same aisle, right? But that's it. So making that connection is incredibly important, and doing it with your kids is even more important. And even if it's making sure the kids, and I know my kids, we go to the grocery store. Oh, I want to stay in the car, Dad. I want to stay in the car. No, come with me. Like, to go into the grocery store, go to the farm, go to the farmer's market. Those sorts of things are incredibly important as well. And I think the third thing is start to trust yourself. I don't care if you have a nutrition degree or not. You, like every other animal on this planet, have evolved to, all of your senses can help you understand what you should be putting into your mouth, what you shouldn't be putting into your mouth, when you should start eating, when you should stop eating, how much you should eat, all of those things. And you have to understand that you are hardwired and built to be able to help make a lot of those decisions, right? And trust yourself. Make an incredibly nourishing meal, eat it, see how you feel after it, and then from every meal forward after that, try to compare, try to make it, meet that foundation or meet that standard from that point forward.
Yeah. So obviously we go to a big box store. I should say they come to us. They deliver our food to the door now, which is phenomenal. We try and do organic, grass-fed. We try and stay as healthy as possible there. And obviously some things slip through the cracks. But when we think about the grocery store, what should people be looking for? Because at the end of the day, sometimes that's all these people have access to right now, at least.
Absolutely. No,
so what should they be looking for?
Be looking for, and remember, this should be fun. It should be work, right? It should be work. You're doing one of the most important things possible, like next to loving and keeping your family safe, is nourishing them. So it should be a little bit of work, and that's fine. It should take some thought. That's fine. But look for the most basic ingredient-free food possible, and do as much as you can at your home, right? So, and first of all, turn over everything that you buy and look at the ingredient list on the back. Even if you don't know what those ingredients are, start to get an idea about, what foods have paragraphs and paragraphs full of ingredients. You would be surprised. Bread, my family and I, part of what we do is we have a sourdough bread bakery, and bread really has 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. Most of the bread in the grocery store, if you turn it over, has 20, 30, 40 something ingredients on the inside of it. Heck, a pretzel. One of the things that we're known for here is we make a really amazing sourdough pretzel. That has flour, water, salt, and butter. That's 4 ingredients in it. If you go to some of the convenience stores, especially here on the East Coast, that are sort of known for their pretzels, people start 32 ingredients in a soft pretzel. 32 ingredients. And just start to take a look. And again, you don't even have to know what they all are. In fact, you're not going to know what they all are, which is a problem. But you can start to see, okay, that's just 50 things, and let me go to something a little more basic. The other thing that I think is really, really important is to get outside. And I know that sounds strange. And and I don't care where you live, because you can do this. And not only is the vitamin D important, and just being outside important, but remember, for the vast majority of the time that we have been on the planet, we have directly accessed our food from the outside world, right? Whether it's a wild plant or a wild animal. And again, this is going to sound really strange for people that this is a huge leap for, but it's not a huge leap. It's part of your heritage. It's part of your ancestry. Start foraging. And again, I know it sounds crazy, but do it. I have taught foraging classes literally all over the world, in Moscow, in Dublin, in Washington, D.C., in the middle of cities. I don't care where you live, in the middle of the country or suburbs or in a city. It is something you can do. And even if you're not going to actually pick the plants and bring them home and eat it, which is something I highly recommend, but if you identify them properly, but start to see what's around you, see how they're growing, start to get, it brings you into that mindset of seasonality and localness of food. And you don't have to do it every day. Do it once a season. Go fishing. If you hunt or have access to hunting, go hunting or clamming, any of those things. And again, you don't have to do it all the time, but every now and then it gives you an opportunity to reconnect and understand what's really, really, really important.
Yeah, I'll tell you how much hunting I don't do. I was sitting in my backyard just the other day, and this huge buck, like any hunter would have been like, "Oh damn, let me get my gun." This huge buck turned the corner, and it scared the shit out of me. And I was like, "Ah!" and scared it away. So that's how much hunting I don't do. But it's fascinating because forever we've eaten off the land all over the world, no matter where you are. And we've gotten so far away from it for convenience. And I like your approach of, it is work, but it's supposed to work. It's the most important thing that you do for you and your family. And I also love the fact that you tie your family into everything you're doing, including your business, right? Like I actually saw, was it your daughter that actually started the bread company and then it's grown?
She did.
Tell me a little bit about how your passion has bled into them and how that's brought you guys together as a family.
So having my family around everything that I do has always been important. Not only because I just wanted, if I was doing something cool, I wanted them to experience it, but I also wanted it to help shape their worldview and how they look at the world and their place in it. So we've actually been very fortunate. We've been to, I was doing the research of this book. We were in 15 different countries, living and working with indigenous and traditional groups, and they were with me the whole time. And wow. That was fantastic. But even just being in the kitchen and how I incorporated them into cooking was really, and whatever their comfort level was, whether they were cracking an egg, whether they were butchering a pig, or they were just sitting there talking to me, them being there and watching my hands and us kind of conversing, and them seeing an animal on the table or seeing a vegetable that actually had dirt on it, before we washed it, really just subliminally helped, I think a lot of these things. But when COVID hit, I had started the Eastern Shore Food Lab, which we've now turned into a nonprofit, but it was a part of the college. And when COVID hit, we had to send all the students home. And my daughter, who at the time was a sophomore in high school, obviously she was home from school too. And she said, "What are we going to do?" And we looked at what we had a lot of in the food lab, which was, we had a lot of flour. And they really knew that the sourdough approach is a technique to make food not only incredibly tasty bread, but the most nourishing form of bread possible. And there was a organization around town that was doing a great job, but they were giving out packets of food to the elderly and people in need. And then remember, at the beginning of COVID, people weren't even going to grocery stores, right? Yeah. And they weren't getting out. So there was a real need for this. But I saw the bread they were putting in these packets was that bread we were talking about earlier, had like 50 ingredients, and bread I would never feed my family. Heck, I won't even feed the ducks this bread. So I was like, you know what? She said, "Can we make sourdough bread and give it away and have it be part of these packs?" Yeah, absolutely. So we were making 80 to 100 loaves of sourdough bread a week, my daughter and I. And this went on for a few months. And finally she said, "Hey, can we start a business?" And my wife and I had always talked about trying to take our approach to food and make it available to as many people as possible. And she said, and sourdough, because of food laws, different states have different cottage industry laws, which is what you can actually make out of your house and sell. And you can actually make bread in Maryland. In fact, bread is the only thing that's kind of in line with our message and mission that we could have made out of our house in Maryland. So I said, "Yeah, we can do that." And she made up a bunch of bread. She gave samples out to all the neighbors. And the next week we started orders, and it was again during COVID, so we were doing deliveries. And in the first week we had, I don't know, a dozen, and then we had maybe the next week we had 50, and this has grown
Wow.
exponentially. And now we've taken over the building that the food lab was in. I've left the school. My wife was a director of special ed in a nearby county, and she's left her position, and we are doing this full time. It's wonderful.
Unreal. So 2 full-time jobs into selling bread.
Well, it started as bread. Now we're doing more than just bread. But yes, absolutely, yeah.
I will say this: I have to. You're not far from me. I have to drive down, and because the pizza looks incredible. So just to come down and have the pizza that you guys make looks absolutely amazing. So tell me a little bit about the business now as it's evolved. What is it now?
So we've actually, it's really cool because we've taken that book and made it come to life. It's the recipes in the book, the approaches in the book. So there's a couple, and this maybe can help answer some of the questions you asked me earlier. Here are some what we stand on here at the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. And again, it's Modern Stone Age Kitchen because it's blending these ancestral approaches to food with modern culinary arts and modern expectations of taste and flavor and those sorts of things, and fusing them together to create a food system that's as nourishing and as possible. So number one, we have a strong stance against industrial nut and seed oils. There are no industrial nut and seed oils anywhere here. So anytime we're doing anything with heat, it's always it's saturated fats, animal fats, lard, tallow, butter, schmaltz, those sorts of things. We use a little bit of olive oil and a tiny bit of cooking if it's not too high a temperature, but we do olive oil, avocado oil, which are fruit oils, and then for things like dressings and the like. So strong stance against industrial nut and seed oils. We use no refined sugars whatsoever. So we use maple syrup, high quality honey, or something called muscovado sugar, which is completely unrefined sugar. Fermentation is at its core of just about everything that we do. Like I said, any technique we're using to food actually makes it safer and more nourishing, which is the opposite of most of the modern food industry. And the other thing that we stand on is anything that we make or serve in house, we've made 100% from scratch. No two ingredients have been put together by anybody but us. So, like you said, with the pizza, first of all, it's a sourdough crust. And we make all the cheese, we make all the meat, we make the pepperoni, we make the Italian sausage, anything going on it, we do a taco night on Thursday, same thing. We bring in maize from Oaxaca. We put it through an ancient process called nixtamalization, which is the only way that we can access the nutrients in maize the human body can. And we stone grind and make our own tortillas, and the same thing, make all the cheese and all the meats and all that. So, and we're expanding and doing a lot more, tons of classes and tons of events. Like we have actually a real Victorian dinner, Christmas dinner this weekend. We have 2 seatings for it. And when you walk into our place on Saturday, it is the same meal you would have had in Victorian England. And so we love to use food not only to nourish people's bodies, but also their brains as an educational tool, because food is one of the few truly sensual things that we have. Consuming food, every one of our senses are firing when we eat, and if we can pair that with some sort of education or some sort of message, then I think we have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that sounds absolutely amazing. So if you guys are listening, and I know I have a large listenership, at least around this tri-state area, go check it out. Go see what he has going on the website and stuff like that. I wanted to talk to you about one last thing before we wrapped up here. And that's really about, you mentioned COVID, right? And it's a scary thing. It's a crazy thing, but it's proven that if you're healthy and you're taking care of yourself, you're going to be okay. And that's a lot of disease, including things like cancer and all these other things, right? What have you seen through your research with this way of living and eating as far as defeating diseases, illnesses, viruses, and all that stuff? Because I imagine you've done the research. You're very well read.
Yeah, read, and also my family and I are very well traveled, and we've been with and spent a lot of time with a lot of these groups that in many cases are still eating a traditional diet, but in some cases, unfortunately, there's something that is the group we went to because there was something they were doing we wanted to do research on, but some of the modern food industry has come in, like Coca-Cola or whatever's coming in, and it's really sad to see. Look, everything that you just said is 100% true. The foundation of health is making sure that we're nourishing our bodies and nourishing our, our cultural, emotional sides as well. A lot of that comes from, state of mind and love and low stress and all that. So certainly, there's no doubt. But food is at its core something that can actually make us healthier, help us fight off all sorts of diseases, not just things like COVID, and just make sure that we're truly living our best life. One thing I said at the beginning, I want to make sure that I bring up again. I spoke to a local community group that was made up of some older folks, mostly in their 70s. And they said, listen, this is all great. At the end of it, it was like a 2-hour presentation. I said, this is all great, but we're 70. Like, what are we going to do now? Like, a lot. It doesn't matter what age you are. You can through food, you can live the best life possible that you can from, at that point in your life. I'm telling you, I'm 48 years old. I was a Division I athlete at one of the best wrestling schools in the country. I am healthier now than I've ever been in my entire life, period, ever. In fact, I'm on the mat with my son now. I got to go to wrestling practice as soon as we wrap up here. I am pain-free. I couldn't walk up the steps without hearing my knees click, without pain. Get out of bed. My feet hurt. My bowels were, and the list can go on and on and on. And I'm sure so many people listening can connect with some piece of this. It's not normal. And the cool part about it's not normal is that you can make a change to do something about it. And it's not just about weight. I was so focused on so much of my life about looking better, right? Looking in shape. And what I should have been focusing on was, how do I just get healthy? And then the weight part certainly just falls into place. So I'll directly answer your question with this. The healthiest people I've ever seen in my entire life, and I'm telling you, we've been around the world. The healthiest people I've ever seen were the Samburu warriors. I actually opened the introduction of the book with these people. They live in Kenya. They're nomadic pastoralists, and they eat blood and milk twice a day. And that's literally the basis of their diet. And this isn't to suggest that people should be eating blood and milk twice a day. And there's a much larger conversation here. But there's a couple of fascinating takeaways from this. Number one, when I saw these people, and I mean all of them, I felt like Michelangelo should have been there sculpting a statue of them. They were, to me, the perfect human form. They had white teeth, broad smiles, white eyes, and just held, and it's hard to describe this, but they just held themselves in a way that spoke confidence and health and nourishment. They ate blood and milk twice a day, right? And they didn't suffer from any of the modern Western diseases that we suffer from. That's number one. Number two, when I came back home, I thought about them quite a bit. Great people. In Maryland, the two things that were the mainstay of their diets, raw milk and blood. Out of those two, one is illegal. Raw milk is illegal in Maryland and in about half the states in the country. And blood is incredibly difficult to get. So here we are, chasing down all these dietary trends, trying to figure out what we should be eating, having conversations about how to feed the world and a growing population and, GMOs, all these conversations. Meanwhile, at the base level, the food that is nourishing the healthiest people I've ever seen in my life is unavailable to me in modern America. It's literally unavailable. And I just think that we need to completely change the conversation, open up our minds, and understand that it's possible to be healthy, live your best life, nourish your family, have an incredibly ethical and sustainable food system, and feed the population. So that's number one. We can do this. And number two, we have to change the conversation. Like we're stuck down this rabbit hole of carbs and vegan and all these other sorts of things. And not that some of them aren't important, but we have to open up our minds. We haven't even scratched the surface of engaging in the conversation that's actually going to answer the problems that we're facing today.
Love it, man. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, how do people get the book? How do they get a hold of you? What's all the good stuff?
All right, great. So the name of the book is Eat Like a Human. And it is available. I know it's available in Barnes & Noble. We've both seen it. Your girlfriend saw it too. And it's available in Barnes & Noble around the country. It's available in some smaller bookstores as well, which I certainly urge people to go and check out your local bookstores. You can get it online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the major outlets. It's available audio, digital, and also in hard copy. And then as far as finding me and the work my family and I are doing, I'm at eatlikeahuman.com. And the whole family venture is at modernstoneagekitchen.com. And on social media, I'm at Dr. Bill Schindler, at Dr. Bill Schindler, and the family, all of what we're doing is at Modern Stone Age Kitchen.
Awesome. Love it, man. Like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question, and that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Wow. I wish I knew this question was coming. That's actually my biggest moment of growth. Wow. Do most people take this long to answer?
I've had some really long ones that they don't even say wow or think, and I just sit there in silence and I just wait. So yeah, some people do.
I'm trying to think of something. My biggest moment of growth. I'll have to say, when there's so many things in my life that have been powerful and important, and right away my mind keeps going to things. With my wife, she literally changed my life, and she's just absolutely amazing and the most supportive, loving person in the world. So over the long haul, the relationship that I have with my wife has really been my biggest growth. Short term, something that made me grow quickly was when I blew my knee out and I was no longer a wrestler, and my identity for a large part of my life was, or what I thought my identity was overnight gone, and I had to figure out who I was, and that forced some major growth and very positive growth once I got over the initial shock.
I love it, man. Bill, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and writing this book and getting your message out there, man. It's really important, and I appreciate you being the guy to do that.
Hey, thank you so much. Pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.